Artfluencing Democracy Dialogues. This is brought to you by the Center for Creative Arts in partnership with the South African State Theatre. My name is Bahle Kwela. Of course. The month of May is recognized as Africa Month, a time where the continent of Africa commemorates the founding of the Organization of African Unity. By establishing the Organization of African Unity in 1963, the African continent became a pioneer in being the first continent to focus on continental unity and to encourage nation building through unity and freedom from oppression. After World War II, the process of decolonization of the African continent gathered momentum as Africans increasingly agitated for more political rights and independence, while in some parts of the continent, colonial powers reluctantly and grudgingly relinquished power. In other parts, African people launched protracted struggles against the recalcitrant colonial regimes.
Ngakho-ke, phakathi kweminyaka ka-1945 kuya ku-1965, iningi lamazwe ase-Afrika athola ukuzimela. IGhana yaba yizwe lokuqala elathola ukuzimela, zathi yisithupha kuNdasa ngo-1957. IGhana-ke yaba isiba ngungqa phambili ekulweni nokuphatha kwamakoloni.
Into engiyithandayo kwi-Afrika imvelo. Siyafuya, sithola ukudla kwesiZulu, thina amaZulu, sibuye sihalele nokwangaphandle okwakwaZulu, sipheke njengenkobe, sigaye impuphu, siyavuna, sidle, sihambe siyosika, senze amacansi, senze nenkamba, ukuze senze imvelo yethu ibe yinhle, ibukeke. Esigodlweni sethu kuhlala lezo zinto. Entweni zesiZulu sinemvunulo yethu esiyibhincayo. Iy'ntombi zethu zikubhinca isigege, nemndindi, nodidla. Omama bavunula ngey'dwaba. Obaba baphatha amahawu, bamise balingisa inkosi yethu uShaka. Sibuye siwathande nawo ngaphandle amakhala okwesiZulu, nasebevunule nabo. Ongangokuthi size siphume nathi siyokubukekela. Nakuthiwa kuyahlanganwa le, kuyokwenziwa umkhosi wakwaZulu, sihlangane kunye nabo. Abangaphandle, abangasesibo abalakithi, kodwa abama-Afrika, sama-Afrika sonke. La e-Afrika indlela esengibona ngayo okungahle kube ngiyazenzela engingakushintsha mina. Indlela iy'ngane zesikole, kakhulu ey'koleni, eseziy'phatha ngakhona. Njengoba sizifundisela ukuthi kusasa zibe abaholi abaphambili, ziphathe izwe lethu ngendlela efanele. Manje ngendlela esezenza ngakhona ziphathe iy'khali ey'koleni. Noma uhamba ubugebengu endleleni usuyesaba, awusafisi ukuhlangana nengane ngoba uyazi iphethini izokwenzani. Baya-rape abantu namhlanje, ku-rape ingane, ku-rape ogogo. Abakhethi ukuthi ungakanani, ekugcineni bababulale. Ukube ngiyazenzela, obekungahle kushintshe, bengahle kushintshe i-foundation phansi le ey'koleni, zikhule ingane, zenze ngendlela efanele.
Emva konyaka iGhana yakhululeka ngaphansi kobuholi bukaKwame Nkrumah, kwabanjwa inkomfa yokuqala ye-Independent African States mhla ziyi-10 kuMbasa ngo-1958. Amazwe aba yingxenye yale nkomfa kwaba iGhana, i-Ethiopia, iSudan, iLiberia, iLibya, iMorocco kanye neTunisia. Kwabakhona nababemele i-National Liberation Front of Algeria kanye nabe-Union of Cameroonian Peoples. Kwakusengamazwe ayisishiyagalombili kuphela ayezimele la e-Afrika ngaleso sikhathi.
The conference was an unequivocal assertion of Africa's rejection of colonial and imperialist domination of the continent.
If I could change one thing about Africa, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree, or change the same thing, is the corruption. The corruption is absolutely crippling. If we could, I imagine in my mind just changing our entire presidency and cabinet and importing a whole new presidency and cabinet, because obviously change begins from the top and all the way down. So if we change our entire cabinet in a lot of our countries where corruption has crippled a lot of its people, just change the whole cabinet and presidency, because corruption is weighing us down and it's getting worse by the year. So I would definitely eliminate the corruption that is so deep-seated in our continent. If we know our history and we know where we come from, we would not be so Afrophobic. We are Africa. All of us are Africa. So it's really crazy that we don't know and we don't understand and we start to hate ourselves because we are Africa. So education, history. Don't tell us about Vasco da Gama. Don't tell us about all these things that we don't care about or that won't as long as it's coolise. Tell us about ourselves in the history books, on TV, on radio, everywhere. Tell us about our history. Tell us about where we come from.
Ukuze kuqhutshekwe kuliwe nokuphatha kwamakoloni, kwabekwa usuku olwabizwa nge-African Freedom Day. Lolu suku lukhomba ibanga eselihanjiwe ekulweni nengcindezelo yamakoloni. Luphinde likhomba ukuzinikela kwabantu base-Afrika ekulweleni inkululeko. Usuku lwe-15 kuMbasa ilona-ke olwabekwa njenge-African Freedom Day noma i-Africa Liberation Day. Kwabe ekuhambeni kwesikhathi selibizwa nge-Africa Day, njengoba sesilazi kanjalo namhlanje. Selugujwa mhla zingu-25 kuNhlaba.
Subsequent to the April conference, another conference, the All Africa People's Conference, was held on the 18th till the 13th of December 1958 in Accra, Ghana. The AAPC was attended by both independent and non-independent country representatives of liberation movements. From South Africa, the African National Congress could not formally attend as the organization, as it was prevented by the apartheid government from doing so. However, a memorandum was sent to the conference. Alfred Hutchinson, a member of the ANC in the Transvaal and 1956 treason trialist, who left the country without a passport after his acquittal, attended the AAPC on behalf of the ANC. Also in attendance was Patrick Duncan, then a member of the Liberal Party of South Africa. Duncan later joined the Pan-Africanist Congress.
So I think what I enjoy the most about being African, firstly, I think this is quite an interesting and tricky question because I've just started being intentional about thinking about what it means to me to be African. But what I do enjoy is knowing that I'm from the land of creation. And so I have direct access to that creative power. Also as an artist, that liberates me knowing that I have direct access to the land, to the creative power. So that's what I enjoy most, knowing that I'm African, born of this continent, with that power within me. Okay, so my answer is gonna sound very cliche because I'm gonna say knowledge is power. But I think the more we get to learn about ourselves, the more we realize that we are all interconnected, and therefore hating the person that you've placed in an other is directly hating yourself. So the more you invest in getting to know yourself, the more you embrace everyone else. And I think that's a direct fighting against the phobia.
On 25 May 1963, leaders of 32 African nations converged in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, and formed the Organization of African Unity.
Perhaps more importantly, the OAU supported the struggle for liberation in Southern Africa through the OAU Liberation Committee. Both the ANC and PAC received support in their struggle against apartheid from the AOU through this committee. Amongst other things agreed to on the formation of the OAU was to change the date of African Freedom Month from 15 April to 25 May. As a consequence of the change, African nations commemorate Africa Day on this day.
After the first democratic election in 1994, South Africa joined the OAU on the 23rd of May 1994. Another significant development connected to this date was the replacement of the OAU 38 years after its formation by the African Union on the 25th of May 2001.
Ovusa amaZulu Credo Mutha wazalwa zingama-21 kuNtulikazi ngo-1921 kwelaKwaZulu, phecelezi iKwaZulu Natal njengoba sesiyazi manje. Ekukhuleni kwakhe wathola ukuthi unesiphiwo sokuprofetha kanye nobizo lobuciko okwakubonakala emdwebeni nasemibazweni yakhe. Ekuhambeni kwesikhathi wabona sengathi iAfrika iyashintsha, amasiko abantu bakhe azoshabalala. Umutha wabe sezama indlela yokugcina amasiko. Abangani bakhe-ke babe sebemeluleka ngokuthi akabhale izincwadi ukuze agcine la masiko.
I am Sinethemba Makhanya, Dr. Sinethemba Makhanya. I'm also Gogo Nombala Mkhuluzane Mvula because uma ngisendumbeni as a healer. Those are the names that I go by because those are the spirits that guide me. I'm a mother of two. I completed my PhD in medical humanities last year. What else? There's like so much I could say about myself, and I don't even know where to begin. I'm currently working at WITS at the Faculty of Health Sciences in the Department of Family Medicine and Primary Care. There I am helping develop a medical humanities curriculum that could hopefully foreground indigenous knowledge systems and traditional medicine. I'm also working at the University of Johannesburg at the Center for the Study of Race, Gender, and Class, where I'm doing a postdoc there. I'm supposed to be writing a book for my postdoc, but that's happening a bit slow because the curriculum development is taking a bit of time. I feel like drama therapy opened the portal for me to be able to answer my calling as Inyanga.
Yeah.
And I guess really it started when I was studying drama at UKZN, just because of the embodiment of another character. I think it opened the doorway for me to understand embodying ancestors as well.
Yeah.
And so there, I think I was not, because I was young. I mean, I was naive to think that I could equate the two. I remember I even did an honors research paper about the Inyanga and an actor. And I wanted to equate the two. But now that, I studied drama therapy, I worked as a drama therapist, and it was significantly different from the work I do now as Inyanga. But I think why I thought that I could find similarities was really about the embodiment of drama therapy, where you get your patients, your clients to become something other than what they are, so they can aspire to be something through embodiment. It was also, I think I also found projective techniques that we use in drama therapy, where a client can externalize what they're feeling to be somewhat similar to the rituals that we do.
Yeah.
So I know there's like this whole, the theories of how theater is ritual and ritual is theater. So in that way, I could say they are similar and they could intersect. But at the same time, I also say they're significantly different and they don't intersect, particularly because drama therapy, you don't call out to your ancestors. I mean, if you're that way inclined, the drama therapist could help you do that, but I wouldn't say a drama therapist can do what a traditional healer does. And I wouldn't say a traditional healer can do what a drama therapist does. And why I'm quite particular to also say that they're also different and they don't intersect is because I want us to not try and mix up paradigms.
Yeah.
Because Inyanga is coming from a specifically African paradigm, and drama therapy is coming from a specifically Euro-American paradigm.
Mm.
And what I find is that when we try to equate the two, as has happened for too long in history, one of the voices end up being erased. And unfortunately, it's always the African voice that becomes erased.
Yeah.
And so for me, yes, you know, it's nice to say. I remember there's a whole lot of readings that talk about how the drama therapist is like a shaman, because they take the, you know, their patients through what. It's fine. Firstly, as Inyanga, I'm not a shaman because I don't know what a shaman is. I feel like it's a term that's been co-opted by the university or the academy to try and do something with it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm being political, but I guess we're also speaking about democracy. We're also speaking about decolonization and transformation. And we need to be careful then to not try equate things where one voice could be erased. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, so as I was working as a drama therapist and trying to register for at the Health Practitioners Council of South Africa, as I said before, I realized that the theories that I was coming from in drama therapy were very Euro-American. They were very Western. I didn't see myself in any of the books I was reading. You know, I studied in New York under Robert Landy, and he's an American professor. So he's writing from American context. Other people have studied in England, and so they're coming from a UK-based context. So all of us, because at the time I came back to South Africa, there was no drama therapy program. There was an introduction to drama therapy that started at Drama for Life, but it was still people that were trained in London and were trained in America that were bringing those theories back to train drama therapists in South Africa without necessarily taking into account the South African context. So at the same time then, when I was grappling with drama therapy, I was also answering my call to be Inyanga.
Yes.
It's been a long journey. And so when I was in the drama therapy space, I got messages from my ancestors and from the spiritual realm. And I was wondering if how that plays out in practice. And I guess I wanted to research it more. If as a drama therapist, I'm working towards mental health, does the Inyanga in me understand mental health? Am I working towards mental health? What am I working towards as Inyanga, who's also a drama therapist? And so that's kind of what inspired the question. I like the word traditional healer anymore. So I prefer to call a traditional healer Inyanga for now. I'm still trying to find the right terminology to use. So then I wanted to understand then what or how is Inyanga thought of mental health, whether you know it was a category for them. Do Inyanga work with mental illness? What is the climate there? And so this is why then I embarked on this PhD. And as I say, my journey to being Inyanga has been long. So I was also in initiation whilst writing the PhD as well. In that way, I was able then to write it from the point of view of Inyanga in training.
Yes.
And I was very specific to say that if we're speaking about construction in terms of language, I was very clear that I didn't want to be an academic that came and interviewed Izinyanga and then interpreted what Izinyanga was saying using paradigms from Euro-America. So it was helpful for me to be Inyanga in training so that I could interpret whatever the healers I was speaking to were saying using an African paradigmatic point of view, which is why the initiation was quite important for me. And what I found really, so what I did was I interviewed healers. I was going through my own initiation. And then I had to speak about health. What is health in an African paradigm? So then I firstly had to understand how healers viewed reality, which is different from, how psychologists or drama therapists do, because we've got uNomkhubulwane, we've got our ancestral spirits, namatongo. So all of that goes into the thesis. Then I had to understand how we viewed the human as Inyanga, because is it science? Psychology tells us that we're mind, body, and spirit, or mind, body, and soul, whereas Izinyanga tell me that we are spirit, soul, and body. And so already it's like, well, then where do Inyanga locate the mind? And then is it mental health or is it mental illness? And then I worked through that. And then I had to then speak about, well, as Izinyanga, when people come to us, what, with presenting illnesses and diseases, what are the causes? So I worked through causation, and from causation, I was able to categorize different categories of health. So someone can be ill because of ancestors. Someone can be ill because of society. Someone can be ill because of, there's a chemical imbalance. And in that way, then I almost worked backwards to construct the view of health. And I really found that Izinyanga don't consider mental health as a category that's separate from general health. So I know it's the cliche of Izinyanga work holistically. That is what came across, is that we work holistically in taking account the person, what surrounds the person, the spirits that surround the person's body. Yeah, it goes on and on and on. But yeah, that was what my thesis was about.
Emva kokuhluleka kaningi emzameni yakhe yokuthola imali emabhange noma izinhlangano ezingamxhasa, ngo-1957 wagcina ephumelele wasungula umnyuziyamu ozinde enkabeni yeSoweto. Yaziwa ngokuthi kwakhaya lendaba noma iCredo Mutwa Cultural Village. Lo myuziyamu uphinde ube nemibukiso yangaphandle yembazo ehamba phambili yakhe umlaphi wendabuko, uCredo Mutwa. Le mbazo eqoqele lapha akayakha kusukela ngo-1974 kuya ku-1986. Iveza umehluko phakathi kobuciko nezinganekwane zase-Afrika kanye nalezo zasentshonalanga. Begqugquzelwa imibhalo eyisimangaliso kaCredo Mutwa, uDokotela Steve Gwena-Mokoena kanye noDokotela Kgafela Wa-Mokgokgodi basebenzisana ukwenza iSong of Nongoma. Lo mdlalo owawuboniswa eState Theatre uxoxa indaba yempi yenkosazane yomculo uNongoma kanye noNarhayi. uNarhayi wabeke eyinkosi enomona nonya. Kulo mdlalo oxoxa ngempilo nomculo, amabutho kaNarhayi nakaNongoma abhekana ngqo.
Song of Nongoma, please allow me to provide context. It was produced by the African Freedom Station, and I was with Gwena Mokoena. The year before we created Song of Nongoma, we put together all the bands that we performed at the African Freedom Station. Well, I wouldn't say all the bands, but a selection of bands. And I was given the task to direct that, and it was really a fantastic experience. And from that, I thought maybe we need narrative. And in speaking to Gwena, we came up with this story, inspired, of course, by many things. One of the inspirations would be marimba from Song of from Indaba My Children by Credo Mutwa. But essentially, our purpose was to explore the power of music. So we relied on that idea of marimba as the mother of music. So we took that into the writing of this play of two tramps sitting lost in a park, and they begin to, dream together about this mother of music. And in our play, we call her Nongoma. Nongoma is with the Sound Warriors. Nongoma versus Nangai. the and then the Nangai and the Soul Thieves, right? So this is a contest between two warring factions, both of them using music. Nangai uses music to contain people. Nongoma uses music to free people. So that is a very simple conflict that we put there. But of course, ours was to explore perhaps our sense of what we feel is happening in the post-colony. I mean, the music that Nagai plays causes a disease called chukutment. So you dance like there's no tomorrow. But the thing about this kind of jiving is that it is completely directionless. So it's just jiving, meaningless jiving without going anyway. So, and this is what it is. Chukuchment, hard jiving. So Nagai causes that disease, and it's terrible because you can end up even collapsing and who knows what. So, and then Nongoma and the Soul Warriors realize that there's a need to bring in a fresh sound. And this sound, we pose it as some kind of force of renewal in this society. So essentially, if the question is what inspired Nongoma, the answer is the power of music. We're exploring the power of music. And then in terms of ways of making plays, whether we're drawing from African indigenous systems, whatever they call it these days. So, but the idea is that I'm interested in how art is made in the continent, because we need to understand that link has always been there. Before me, you had a whole lot of people talking about theater in terms of the continent. Credo himself, that I just spoke about, had gone through the continent studying systems of performance, studying how things are staged, and you have people like Lomo before Credo in 1936. So these are all my predecessors, but it's not just in South Africa. I've noticed how in Ghana they actually seem to be ahead of us. People like Afua Sutherland, Mohammed Abdallah. There's an interesting tradition there where Afua Sutherland takes the stories of the spiders and creates a form which she calls Anansesem stories. And then Mohammed Abdallah builds on that to create Abibi Goro, right? So that Abibi for black, Goro for play. So then we begin to see some kind of attempt to define black theater from a long-standing tradition. And when you talk about African perspectives, I'm thinking, yes, there's a need to link with the continent, because certainly from early civilizations of passion plays, I'm talking about the morning of time here, Meroitic civilizations, where there were these passion plays that begin to become the roots of our ways of making plays, because it begins with ritual, and this is how people like Lomo define drama. It wasn't entertainment at the beginning. So those are the things that I'm interested in. Of course, one is still trying to understand more. Look, the point is that governments always want to use art to stage manage their rule, So, and this is not something new. It's not something that comes with the neo-apartheid dispensation. It's something that has always been part of how governments do things. You'll remember that if you look at where we come from, the institutions like the State Theatre, the market theater were informed, of course, by the attempt by government to control, the psyche of white people at the time. Before, black people came into the picture, they were to be given this idea that they were Europeans living in Africa, and they were being deceived to think that they were superior than the rest of the people. So, and this is how they maintain apartheid, because images, help to stage manage things, help to make people believe in certain things. So a lot of these theaters were patronized by white people because of this assumption that, they were drawing on this great Europeanness. And then, of course, then they began to invite the elite, the black middle class, as part of, attracting, us into this idea of being civilized. And you remember that in the 50s, for instance, our fathers, thought that you were not educated if you couldn't speak Shakespeare. So these are some of the traditions that came, the black elite buying into this elitist theater, but it wasn't just elitist, it was Eurocentric in many ways. So that the politics of respectability, the politics of that comes with being part of, this whiteness, and then you abandon your own stuff, which was, of course, in many ways suppressed and brutally. The Witchcraft Suppression Act, you'll remember, went for the spiritual practices, and with that goes the songs, the gestures, the rhythms, as I've said, because our spiritual traditions give birth to our artistic expressions.
Iningi lembhalo kaMuthwa igxila ezinganekwaneni zase-Afrika nezisiZulu. Nguyena umbhali wezincwadi My Children yango-1964, Let Not My Country Die yango-1986, Song of the Stars, Law of the Zulu Shaman yango-1996, Zulu Shaman, Dreams, Prophecies and Mysteries yango-2003, kanye ne-Woman of Four Paths, The Story of a Strange Black Woman in South Africa yango-2007. Ngo-2011 kwakhishwa inoveli yemdwebo esuselwa encwadini Indaba My Children. Le noveli yabizwa nge-MA Book 1 of the Tree of Life Trilogy eyashicilelwa nguMark McCowan neciko u-Andre Human. Ngo-2017, uMuthwa wahlonishwa nge-Lifetime Achievement Award kuma-South African Literary Awards.
Directed by Dr. Ismail Mohammed, the Center for Creative Arts in the University of KwaZulu-Natal has established itself as one of the leading organizations that promote and support African-inspired art forms.
The Center for Creative Arts at the University of KwaZulu-Natal is committed towards developing partnerships across the African continent. With our Poetry Africa Festival, we present poets from all 5 regions of the African continent: North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa. With our Durban International Film Festival, we try to ensure that more than 50% of our content is content that is from the continent. We believe that by advancing African content, we can create greater opportunities and greater mobility for artists within our continent. What is definitely needed on the African continent is a clear policy by all governments to support collaboration, cooperation, and co-curation. At the present moment, the majority of African artists on the African continent who want to engage in mobility and cross-border collaboration are still dependent on funding from Western governments and from diplomatic missions that are on the African continent to support them. Unless there is a clear and distinct fund for African mobility supported by the continent itself, we will always dependent on the West, and we will not be able to grow the kind of African cultural identity that we wish to advance.
In Pretoria, the South African State Theatre plays a pivotal role in creating a platform that supports African art forms alongside its cultural programming.
Legislated as a cultural institution according to the Cultural Institutions Act 119 of 1998, the theatre's CEO, Dr. Selim Kize, alongside Aubrey Segabi, established Afrocentric programming as part of the fundamental celebration and development of the South African performance industry.
Well, Afrocentric programming for us, it's in line with our identity, which in 2016 we made a conscious decision to align our artistic program, all our artistic activities, including the look and feel of the theater building, to align with an African identity. And the reason we did that was because we understood that it is important that we invest in our own African and our own South African artistic talent. Hence, we are having the kinds of show that we have been having. In fact, in 2019, we even had a show from Lagos, Nigeria, Fela in the Kalakuta Queens, and that was part of the implementation of our own brand identity, this Pan-African identity as South African State Theatre. And actually you can see it goes through, it permeates through everything we do, be it our development programs, be it our educational programs, or all the shows on the main stage. They are in line with the theme of embracing what is African, not only looking at in an exclusive form, but also looking at African identity or Pan-Africanism in its broader sense, including the African diaspora, but also making sure that our identity is not exclusive. So I think for the State Theatre, it has paid off. We have been vindicated. If you look at the kinds of shows that we have had here that have won awards, have been invited to international festivals, it actually shows that it pays off to invest in our own local talent, not only locally as in South Africa, but also nationally and internationally. I think what needs to be done is actually to make sure that we encourage dialogue between different countries, different theaters, to make sure that the African perspectives develop, that they grow, that they prosper, and that they are able to compete with other theaters in other continents. So I think for me, the most important thing is partnerships, is dialogue, but also support from the governments of the different countries. I think we can still do more in our country to support, for example, our collaboration with our colleagues from Nigeria. There was no support from any of the public or private sector in South Africa or in Nigeria. And I think those are the kinds of things that need to be encouraged to make sure that there is collaboration, and that those kinds of collaborations will do more to actually enable us to achieve the AU Vision 2063 of making arts and culture the center of Africa's development.
The South African State Theatre's artistic director, Obi Sekhabi, is a multi-award-winning playwright and director. Since taking reign at the South African State Theatre, his visionary artistic programming has worked towards decolonizing a theatre that was once apartheid's pride.
Hey! Small little girl. Eyes nearly popping out of his face from what seems like shock. He doesn't piss about the bush, he aims for the pit. Makwete, place of lumps of soil, our town, a town that sleeps.
Wayisuke eTranskei elibhekise eThekwini kwelikaBhanana eyobheka umyeni wakhe umkhizi usuka nje lapha ekhaya lakhe ukhulele uno9 months awahamba ngempela wathi mayifika nje Claywood ehle taxi rank kwamiswa amaphoyisa emcela uDompasi lapha akawuphele.
uNomvula Mloka oyimeneja ye-South African State Theatre weseka kakhulu ehhovisini lomqondisi wezobuciko. uMloka uqhakambisa ukubaluleka kwezibukeli neqhaza ezilibambayo etheatre.
Uphinde aqinisekise nokuthi yonke imibukiso ebese-South African State Theatre ijabulisa izibukeli ngokwahlukana kwazo, iphinde igqugquzele ubumbano.
The audiences in Pretoria, South Africa, and even continentally have been very responsive to the programming that we have put out. You will note even with Kucheza, which is the Swahili word for dance, we have garnered audiences and performers from beyond our borders, deeper into the continent, and those have actually yielded more interest in our programming. So we are now getting requests from Chad, we are getting requests from Senegal. So there is definitely an interest, and it does say to us that we are right in our programming, because then there has been a need for us to extend beyond ourselves and our borders to those that are in need of performing spaces, and then we are now allowing them to come into our spaces. And in terms of the diversity and that Afrocentrism, that is very central to our mandate as the South African State Theatre, because we are the theatre for Africa. We are open to the continent, we are open to global audiences, and that also then addresses our intention to go digital, because we have said for those that cannot come through physically into our spaces, they will then be able to access our content digitally. So I would say definitely audience responses, and there is a definite intention to be Afrocentric. I must say, wow, the feat that we accomplished was bringing Fela to South Africa. Fela Kuti and the Kalakuta Queens with an 80% Nigerian cast. And that for me was our clear, if we were not clear to the audiences and to the global audiences about our intents, bringing the Fela cast here said so and cemented our place in the hearts of Nigeria, but also in the hearts of the continent, to say South Africa is open to engage. So that would be on a continental space. But locally, I must say, having Mama Sibongile perform here in the height of COVID before her passing, that for us was a great celebration. You would know she is definitely a diva. She has performed everywhere. But having her perform here at home in our spaces, there is an aura she carries, man, where she mixes that opera and the global classic sound with Zulu notes and Zulu lyrics. You cannot deny that. So Mama Sibongile, definitely, and Fela Kuti and the Kalakuta Queens.
Ngo-2017, ibhaleho eyabhalwa nguLebu Leyisa yavezwa khona lapha eSouth African State Theatre. Lo mdlalo umayelana nentombazane esohambeni lokuzithola ukuthi ngubani. Kulo mdlalo izibukeli zikhonjiswa indawo yekhethelo yabaSuthu yokukhuliswa kwamantombazane. Kulapho-ke le ntombazanyane esizithola ikhona. uShaka Zulu, The Gaping Wound, umdlalo oqondiswe nguMishek Mavuso Makabane. Lo mdlalo uxoxa udaba lwenkosi yakaZulu eduma umhlaba wonke, uShaka Zulu kaSenzangakhona, owayengumprofethi, ekhaliphile, eyinxusa kanye nomholi wamabutho, umakhi wesizwe owayenembono yokubumbanisa abantu basezansi ne-Afrika. Lolu daba luxoxwa imbongi. Ithatha ibeke izibukeli emlandweni, iphinde ibuye ngengoma, izibongo nangokusina.
Hello, Sanbonani. My name is Nonhlanhla, my surname is Dube, and I play Nomtopa, Shaga's sister on Shaka Zulu the musical.
When you are about to go watch a piece, it's not only about, I don't like using the word entertained, but because theater for me is something else. It has to move me, it has to disturb me, it has to provoke me, has to change and change my thinking somehow. So when you are asked to go into theater to come back and report to the world what you have seen, I find that I have to be in a conversation with myself as an audience, as a creator, and yeah. So it's when I'm watching, those two things are bouncing from each other. So watching it, it's always, I have a tick in my brain that, ooh, okay. I always look for good things when I watch theater. No matter how odd where the theater piece is going or how far from me the theater is, I always look for that thing that would make me go like, oh my word, that's it. Because as soon as I grab that qala, then the piece will not sound as if I'm a hater or I am something else, because there's always something good in anything you watch. So watching the theater piece, it was that dialogue that was happening with me, like, okay, now ngibuka njengomqondisi, now ngibuka njengomdlali we-stage, now ngibuka njengo a writer, a reviewer. So all of those things, they help me find the understanding of the piece. For the longest time, we've been hearing people saying that your stories are valid. I mean, Lupita said that, and we rode with that. You know, we took that and like, yes. And young people, I think of young people from Ilokshini, where they say, "Gine story, I want to tell my story," and no one has ever really said, "This is how you tell your story." They always said, "You have to tell your story," you know. So then the importance of watching Ushaka, it made me feel like this is how you tell a story. You get a team of people who believes in that narrative. You get an important institution that will give you a platform to tell a story that is derived from your womb. And then you see that happening. And also the importance of watching Ushaga was it prolonged the conversation of how to own your own tale, how you own your own story. And watching that piece and seeing the costume and seeing the interpretation of a story that we all love so well. And I think I'm like, wow, ingane encane esafufusa stage and watches something that I've read in a novel or something they've watched or heard in the radio one day. Now they see it live. The importance of reliving that story, giving that story power. It included, if I can put it so, that it's not only the music, House of Music, le musical, you know, yeah. Already. So seeing actors established, telling a story like that, it just made me live again, if that makes sense. Quickly think of what Shaga represented as a king to the Zulu nation. I think about the strength that he came with. I think about the brevity that he had. I think about earlier on you mentioned intelligence, which I didn't think of. That king was intelligent, but also the idea of but being selfish. He was selfish.
I get you.
And I think we miss the concept of what it means to be selfish in this day and time. And if we now visit the meaning and the concept of being selfish, a lot of things will be solved in a different way, or will open a lot of conversation. Because Ushaga became Ushaga because he thought of himself. And there's this idea, I don't know how true it is, that Zulu are a bit of a people that think of self, you know, and Shaka used that. He took over things that did not belong to him and made it his own.
That's true.
And in the Zulu nation rose like that because he had that thing, you know. And I think what if we can take certain things that Shaka had as individuals, not as a group, but as an individual, and in little things every time, in how you take care of yourself. I always like to talk about mental illness, and when we combine mental illness and trying to take care of self and being selfish and say, Namhlanje, it's about me. And if you take that and put it in yourself, it's a bit of healing will happen all the time, but strength as well. Shaka bengekavume ukuhlula impi. And he would nome kufike la engasaphumeleli khona, he would go back and try and see and plot and replot. He was intelligent, but he knew the strength that he has, and also communication, because to communicate, it comes from yourself again, so that you bring it to the people. He was able to create a replica of himself in his warriors, and that is amazing. And that is amazing to take. I think we need to revisit what musicals are, the understanding of musicals, create a way of creating musicals, and the style of the pattern actually of creating musicals. I think we need to revisit that musicals it does not mean it does not mean that. That's just one. I don't want to go into too much into that, but also when I think of the play, I think it lost a lot of its food, a lot of its substance when they spoke Ngesingisi. And I think as soon as it play yaqhuba Ngesingisi, and I could see, like, literally, I was sitting in a big city there, I could see the audience, you know, mocking the English. Because how can you tell a story, a history of a Zulu king in Ngesingisi? And I think as soon as that happened, it took away the soul of the play, of the production. And I think it is a production that would do better if it revisit the script again. I think we need to create a culture where we know we've got great singers, we know we have great dancers, we know we have great actors, we know we have an eye in casting, but we need to revisit a culture of plotting and redrafting and working on our scripts before we go to production. And I think that's what was missing with the production. It's the angle of the English as a medium to communicate the story that they took, but also I think the script, it needed a little bit of more work. Either if those were looked into, I think it would have been a really, really, really powerful offering from everyone who was involved.
Umbuso Khoza ungumculi ogqugquzela ezomdabu. Wenza umculo ofaka isigqi se-jazz.
umqophi wezingoma osewina izindondo eziningi, ubuye abe isishoshovu samalungelo omphakathi, uSimphiwe Dana. Njengeciko uyaqhubeka nokubhebhethekisa umyalezo wothando, ithemba, ukuphathana kahle kwabantu kanye nokuphakanyiswa kwamalungelo omphakathi.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Sakile Msweli. I'm a clinical psychologist and a huge Simphiwe Dana fan. And I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on Isipaji sika Simphiwe Dana, which was a live performance held at the South African State Theatre on the 28th and the 29th of May 2022. I believe that this show was inspired by Simphiwe Dana's own personal journey of having to find purpose and meaning again in her art. And by doing so, she invited us, the audience, to do the same, not only in the show itself, but also in the different aspects of our lives. Before the show started, Simphiwe Dana's band and backup singers were singing Injongo, which was a song from her One Love movement on Bantubeko Street's 2006 album. And the song in and of itself speaks about purpose and drive, that which gets you going, even when times seem to be difficult. And that seemed to be a permeating theme throughout the show. Isipaji sika Simphiwe is Simphiwe Dana on her A game. She reminds us who she is. She reminds us who we are through this art form. She takes us through music from Zandisile. She takes us through music for One Love movement on Bantubeko Streets. She takes us through music from Culture Noir and Firebrand. But what is striking is that even when she's singing songs that we're sort of used to, they seem to be repackaged or reimagined. Although she's saying to us, we need to reimagine who we are and re-offer ourselves to the world. Although she's saying to us, we need to reimagine who we are and re-offer ourselves to the world. The show is truly about healing and about acknowledging all the challenges that we faced as South Africans through the multiple epidemics that we faced, the latest being the COVID epidemic, and the losses that we faced. And she invites us to not minimize our emotions and our experiences as they relate to these things, but to celebrate them and acknowledge them. Simphiwe Dana remarks that as South Africans, we seem to use laughter as a coping mechanism. And she says, the more things fall apart, the harder we laugh. And I agree with her on this. And finally, what I would like to say about the show is that it's certainly not as heavy as Umoya, but it has its moments of being naughty and sexy when she took us through Tribe. And there were moments when we were dancing as she was closing off the show with Gia Gia. So in and of itself, it is quite a spiritual journey that Simphiwe Dana took us through. So her music was transcending just performance art, but more on the spiritual side, dare I say, a religion. I certainly think it is an art form that needs to celebrate our past by both archiving and retrieving our memories, our stories about who we are, stories about who we were, stories about what happened to us and what continues to happen to our people. I certainly believe, like how Simphiwe Dana did with Isipaji, it is an art form that needs to also be reflective of itself and how much it's been able to achieve over the years. I think it needs to be reflective of the times. It needs to be reflective of our people's lived experiences. It needs to celebrate our diversity and call for all forms of inclusivity. Moreover, I do believe that in 10 years' time, African-centered art needs to start painting hopes that are far beyond the clouds, because as African people, we are limitless, and continue to demand our space in the world stage so that we can share the gifts that have been bestowed on us. Thank you.
The regeneration of Africa means that a new and unique civilization is soon to be added to the world. The African is not a proletarian in the world of science and art. He has precious creations of his own, of ivory, of copper, and of gold, fine-plated willow ware and weapons of superior workmanship. Civilization resembles an organic being in its development. It is born, it perishes, and it can propagate itself. More particularly, it resembles a plant. It takes root in the teeming earth, and when the seeds fall in other soils, new varieties sprout up. The most essential departure of this new civilization is that it shall be thoroughly spiritual and humanistic. Indeed, a regeneration, moral and eternal.